Hello friends, welcome back to Every Arnold Movie Ever, episode 11. And we've come to the quintessential Arnold vehicle, a movie that cements all of his trademarks, high body counts, superhuman strength, hilarious one-liners in one giant monument to 80s excess. And it just so happens to be one of the most purely entertaining movies in his entire filmography. Time to let off some steam and talk about Commando. Commando was the first project Arnold Schwarzenegger chose to make after the success of The Terminator. Even though Red Sonja was released first, we can give Arnold a mulligan since it was a favor to Dino De Laurentiis and filmed before The Terminator came out. You can find out all about that if you haven't seen it in my Red Sonja episode somewhere right over here. Now this is Arnold in his newfound role as a hot property in Hollywood, suddenly having the flexibility to choose the leading roles he always dreamt about for years. For me personally, the fact that both Conan and The Terminator each took in $40 million at home demonstrated that the American public accepted me as both a hero and a villain. At the same time, over at 20th Century Fox, Barry Diller became the new head of the company, and on the first day on his job, he brought in producer Joel Silver and writer Steven D'Souza, and he said, "This guy Schwarzenegger is a phenomenon. If you could find a movie for him that could be done under $12 million, I'll greenlight it immediately." That led to D'Souza and Silver, a few years after they gave us 48 Hours, but a few years before Die Hard, to comb through all the scripts on the lot for something that would fit Arnold. And then they came across a script called Commando. Originally, Commando was written by Jeff Loeb and Matthew Wiseman, the team that also wrote Teen Wolf. Surprising transition. Loeb would go on to produce Smallville, write for Lost, Heroes, a bunch of comics, and eventually become the head of Marvel Television during their Netflix reign. Their version of the script was about an Israeli soldier named John Matrix. Yes, John Matrix, who renounces violence but is thrust back into action after his daughter is kidnapped. Now, once Steven D'Souza was attached as writer, he took it, rewrote it, but he did keep the Matrix last name because, I'm sorry, you get handed a gift like John Matrix, you do not let that go. And then he drove to Arnold's house and pitched him the idea. And as he was doing so, he accidentally slipped into his Arnold impression that he would do at parties, and when he did, he thought Arnold would kill him. Instead, Arnold laughed and he said, "I like this part. I'm not a robot from the future, a caveman from the past. I'm in clothes and having a family. It's a part John Wayne could play. I do this picture." And just like that, Big died. I'm sorry. I would love to see the Venn diagram of people watching this video and people who enjoyed that reference. It is just two circles very, very far apart. And just like that, Arnold had his follow-up to The Terminator. But the script still needed work. Arnold had to incorporate some of the teachings he gleaned from under the learning tree of James Cameron. Well, one of the teachings. Arnold's biggest takeaway from The Terminator wasn't the audience's love of the incredible handcrafted effects, the immaculate tight storytelling, or the travel across time love story. No, it was the audience's appetite for catchphrases. Arnold was enamored with the audience's reaction in the scene where the janitor asks the Terminator if he has a dead cat in his flophouse, and the Terminator chooses to say,
"Fuck you, asshole."
According to Arnold, people in the theaters were howling at that. It's the opposite of what you expect, and it's funny because it breaks the tension. I recognized that such moments could be extremely important and added wisecracks in the next action film, Commando. Those one-liners became my trademark, and the corny humor deflected some of the criticism that action movies were too violent and one-dimensional. It opened up the movie and made it more appealing to more people. And even though Conan and The Terminator were hits and huge resume builders, they didn't translate Arnold's charisma and playfulness. Both roles required stillness, discipline, exacting dialogue that had to be tailored to what Arnold could pronounce at the time. Funny as it sounds, Commando was a chance for him to play something that better reflected his real-life personality. Now, casting Arnold was obviously the most important piece of this puzzle, but they filled out the rest of the cast with an all-star lineup of character actors like Dan Hedaya, who low-key snuck into every single one of your favorite movies from the 90s, David Patrick Kelly, who also has a way of popping up in great movies through the years, from The Warriors to 48 Hours to The Crow to John Wick to, of course, my personal favorite, and very predictably, Jerry Horn in Twin Peaks. They also got Bill Duke, who we'll see partner again with Arnold in Predator, and who I once saw in a Ralph's in LA buying a bag of Cuties oranges. I always thought that was a funny image. Giant, intimidating man, little tiny cutie oranges. Alyssa Milano, who much like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, was also shooting a successful sitcom at the time. And weird side note, the movie was a huge hit in Japan, and for some reason, a record company offered Alyssa Milano a 5-album contract. She was not a singer, but she accepted it anyway, and all 5 went platinum. Good for her. Rae-Dong Chong plays a flight attendant Matrix abducts, so he isn't just talking to himself the whole time. And for the role of the main villain, the vengeful loose cannon Bennett, they cast actor most likely to be confused with the greatest American hero, Wings Hauser. Wings Hauser! Could you imagine Wings Hauser going up against John Matrix? What a matchup. Commando was given a $9 million budget, half that of Red Sonja. And filming began on April 22nd, 1985. And after a day and a half, it was clear Wings Hauser was not working as the villain. Can you believe that? Wings Hauser didn't make a great villain. So they fired Wings Hauser, and in flew Vernon Wells, an Australian actor who played the villain Wes in Mad Max, and also has an IMDb page longer than, I don't know, it's definitely longer than the list of people who enjoyed my Sex and the City reference earlier. He came in straight from Australia without any notice, so he didn't even have time to get fitted for wardrobe. He just took Wings' outfit and threw it on. And honestly, that explains a lot. During filming, Arnold and Vernon did not get along. Arnold felt like he was too unhinged and told the director to not give him a real knife. Wow. To be fair, Vernon, in his own words, sounds like a psycho. The first scene we did was the one where I have the knife to his throat. When the director yelled at... Okay, all right, that's my Australian accent. Admittedly, it could use some work, so I'm just going to go with my Beatles accent because it's probably closer. Oh, when the director yelled action, I just went straight into it. I mean, I was Bennett, and I was going to cut Arnold's throat. There was no way I wasn't. But I was so hyped to be in the movie, they could have asked me to jump off the Empire State Building, and I probably would have. Note to self, do not mess with Vernon Wells. Okay, got it written down there. The movie opens with a few brief sequences showing Bill Duke playing a former Green Beret named Cook, murdering several people until they are super dead. Did he really have to use a mini Uzi here and then shoot the guy some more after he clearly passed on? Then he randomly steals a car from a dealership by driving it through a window and also running over the car dealer. Why does he steal the car? Never explained. Why does he do it in the most gratuitous way possible? I don't know, just to show he's a massive dick. And if you're wondering why the cops aren't chasing him, I'm going to explain that in a moment. We're then introduced to John Matrix in the only way someone named John Matrix can be introduced. Carrying an entire tree down a mountainside against the soundtrack of a saxophone and steel drums. Then the prior 3 minutes of killings come full circle and are revealed as a setup for this subversion. Someone approaches Matrix from behind. We've been trained to expect this is an assassin, but instead, it's his daughter. Aww. Now we're treated to a sitcom opening montage of them doing super normal father-daughter things like eating ice cream, feeding a deer, swimming, practicing karate. There was no wife or mother to speak of, so I'm just going to assume he birthed his daughter himself, Junior style. And the one-liners are actually established here as part of his character. Even before the killing starts, when Matrix is sitting at the table with his daughter, he's got jokes.
Why don't they just call him Girl George? It will cut down all the confusion, I think.
And already, this is a side of him we haven't seen in the previous 10 Every Arnold Movie Ever episodes. Maybe the closest you would get is the Jane Mansfield story, but even there, you don't see him as a loving father like this. But, of course, that piece cannot last, because Matrix is called back into action by his old unit leader, Kirby. Now, it turns out all those people that were murdered earlier were in Matrix's former special unit, which means Matrix might be next. So Kirby leaves 2 god-awful soldiers to look after Matrix, even admitting they're not very good.
Are they any good?
Real good, but not as good as you were.
And he turns out to be right, because less than a minute later, these guys are gunned down. Matrix goes to a secret gun stash, but it's too late. Jenny has been taken. Just so happens her dad is a guy with a very particular set of skills. And this guy here thinks he has the upper hand by delivering a message that Matrix has to cooperate, but Matrix instead recycles a Terminator quip.
And if you want your kid back, then you gotta cooperate, right?
Wrong.
And then chases after the bad guys. The great thing about Commando is every couple minutes, they throw some ridiculous set piece at you. And this is the first one. Matrix's truck has been disabled, but that's not going to stop him. Instead, he pushes it down the hill through a forest to chase after Jenny. Now, the thing I love about this is that the bad guys, all they have to do is just hit the brakes at any point, and he would just fly right past them. But they don't, and they're continually shocked, like, oh my god, he's still coming after us, the crazy bastard. Eventually it fails, and the car explodes for no reason. Matrix gets captured, and then the exposition is laid out for why they took his daughter. Basically, this guy in the chainmail, Bennett, used to be in Matrix's unit. Dan Hedaya here is playing a dictator of a fake, generally South American country called Valverde, which is also referenced in Die Hard 2. Now, Hedaya has been ousted from power and wants Matrix to kill the president, or they will kill Matrix's daughter. Bennett is mad at Matrix for kicking him out of the special unit for being an insane person, so he jumped at the opportunity to help make his life miserable. Bennett, Sully, and this other guy, Henriques, escort Matrix to the airport, which that was nice of them. Arnold wastes no time using yet another Terminator line, this time his most iconic.
I'll be back, Bennett.
And we learn Bennett loves saying John's name.
John, I'll be ready, John.
In fact, he says it quite a bit.
John.
In my Terminator episode, I talked a lot about that line, I'll be back, and why it worked on so many different levels. Obviously, the line here isn't nearly as funny or iconic. It's simply a callback. But I guess because it's the first time he's done it, it's kind of fun. We're going to see in future episodes, though, he just keeps going back to the well.
That's what you always say.
I do?
Now, the airport sequence is another classic. First, we get the setup to a joke that doesn't pay off for another half hour.
You're a funny guy, Sully. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last.
I contend that this is the I'll be back of Commando. And then once Matrix and Henriques are in first class, well, it was nice of them to splurge. He asks for a pillow and blanket and finds out that the flight is 11 hours. Henriques is there to make sure Matrix makes it to Valverde, but Matrix has other plans. So he snaps the guy's neck like a chicken's.
Like a chicken's.
Then we get another great one-liner.
Don't disturb my friend. He's dead tired.
Right into the next absurd set piece where he finds his way to the landing gear, jumps off the plane after it's taken off into a very shallow swamp, and then just instantly walks away unscathed. Look, I have a harder time getting out of bed in the morning without all my bones cracking than Matrix does falling out of a plane. Unbelievable. But now he has a ticking clock before the plane lands, so he follows Sully, who is currently hitting on flight attendant Cindy. Sully gets rejected not once, but twice. However, he eventually chooses to walk away, as opposed to doing some crazy scumbag shit like abduct her. Anyway, John Matrix abducts her, pours salt in the wound by ripping out the passenger seat of her car. The assumption here is that he wants to hide from Sully's view, but then, well, I mean, also those seats recline. You could have just done that. Quick shout out to Radon Chong, who does hold her own in these scenes. She's a really fun foil to Arnold. She isn't a damsel in distress. She's always commenting on the masculinity around her.
These guys eat too much red meat.
They even give her a reason to hang around later by explaining that she can fly an aircraft, and apparently that's the one thing Matrix hasn't learned how to do. Now here we get a line from him that doesn't seem important in the moment.
Trust me.
But is retroactively iconic thanks to its repurpose in Terminator 2.
Trust me.
And speaking of T2, we then head to the Galleria, which is where the T-1000 tracked down John Connor. Also, it's a mall, and as we established in the Jingle All the Way episode, Arnold loves malls. But this mall is unlike anything I have ever been to, and I've been to this Galleria. There just so happens to be a jam-packed, seedy bar straight out of Mars in Total Recall, where Sully has some shady business to conduct. My dudes, it's 2 p.m. Look at this place. It is packed. Anyway, Cindy is supposed to lure Sully out of the bar, but instead she tells mall security about Matrix. This leads to Matrix beating up a gaggle of heavily armed mall security guards and lifting an entire phone booth over his head. And if you're wondering why the cops weren't after Cook earlier in the movie, it's because they're all here patrolling the mall. Meanwhile, the random guy from the bar is like, ooh, are we killing cops now? And he just runs out of the bar and starts shooting and gets himself killed for no reason. Buddy, what are you doing? Just stay in the seedy daytime bar. Nobody knows you're there. Oh, man. When I lived in LA, there was a bar in Burbank called Grady's that had a big sign out front that said open at 6 a.m. And I always wanted to go in just to see the types of people who would show up when those doors open. I was scared to ever do it, but I imagine it's a lot like what this bar is in this movie. As this is happening, Cindy regrets setting up Matrix and decides to help him. So Matrix chases after Sully, then gets hit by his car, which, look, after falling out of an airplane, getting hit by a car is like getting shocked by a doorknob. It's more annoying than painful. They give chase and crash again. Arnold is completely unaffected, and it seems his superpowers have transferred to Cindy too, because even though she's not even sitting in a seat, which means she's definitely not wearing a seatbelt and would have absolutely died on impact, she's fine.
You're right.
I think I'm dead.
You're right.
And now we come to what is, in my opinion, everything great about Arnold's career summed up in 2 minutes. If you want anyone to understand the appeal of Arnold Schwarzenegger and why he became such a huge star, I would show them this sequence where he confronts Sully. It starts with an impressive, impossible feat of strength, with Matrix holding Sully over a cliff with one arm, followed by some wisecracks from Matrix as he toys with Sully, who threatened his daughter earlier.
I have to remind you, Sully, this is my weak arm.
Matrix also proves he's one step ahead of Sully, while Sully tries to prove why he's worth keeping alive. And then we get the punchline to a setup from 30 minutes earlier.
Remember, Sully, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Matrix. You did.
I lied.
So satisfying. And just when you think that's the end of the scene, we dip into another gratuitous feat of strength where he casually pushes over a car, followed by a bonus quip that made me laugh harder than I lied, because it is so redundant, but they just couldn't help themselves.
What'd you do with Sully?
I let him go.
For me, this is peak Arnold. Obviously, he's made way better movies than this. He's had more exciting action sequences, more poignant moments, even had funnier quips. But the combination of all these things at once is just the perfect distillation of his appeal. It's wish fulfillment of the highest order. There's a joy in watching him fuck with this scumbag, and a satisfaction in not only seeing the guy get his comeuppance, but getting a predictable but gratifying payoff to Arnold's setup earlier in the movie. I love it. And it's something none of the other action stars at that time could have pulled off. And then that scene is nearly topped when Matrix goes after Cook in his motel. We get another classic line.
The Green Beret's gonna kick your big ass.
I eat green berets for breakfast.
And right now, I'm
Very hungry.
A claustrophobic fight where 6 bullets are fired and the couple having sex next door doesn't notice until they break through the door. Good for them. And we get our third recycled line from Terminator, the one that helped make Commando what it is today.
Fuck you, asshole.
Fuck you, asshole.
And then Cook gets impaled. At this point, Matrix knows he's getting closer to his objective, so they make a pit stop to a place called Surplus City. But instead of just using stealth or picking a lock, Matrix drives a bulldozer through the front door. This guy is just an absolute menace. I like when he's putting all these massive guns in the cart, but also remembers, oh, you know what? I should probably grab some flippers just in case. And when once again you're wondering, are all those cops still in the mall? Suddenly he gets arrested. It's pretty funny because when I was watching this again, I totally forgot that this happened. And I went, oh man, are we going to take this whole long detour where we have to go downtown and he gets booked for everything? But oh no, Cindy, after one false start, just immediately learns how to use a rocket launcher and fires it directly where her friend John Matrix is being held. Which seems like a bad idea since the guy you're trying to save is also inside that truck, but just like everything else, he just steps out without one scratch on him at all. By the way, one other insane side tangent regarding Radon Chong. She was eating at a Bubba Gump. That's not the end of the story. She was eating at a Bubba Gump and thought the waiter serving her had a certain quality to him. So she cast him in a short film as she was making and flew him down to LA, which turned out to be his first big break. That actor? Chris Pratt, who, by the way, is now married to Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, Catherine. Thanks, I guess? Well, let's skip ahead here to Arnold preparing to rescue his daughter. Instead of using those flippers from earlier, he rows a boat to shore in his undies. Then he arrives on the beach and his underwear changes color for one shot. And here we get our classic gear up montage. I have no idea why he puts on the camo paint, because he makes his presence known immediately, and for the next 17 minutes, it is unrelenting mayhem. According to the producers, when Rambo First Blood Part 2 was released a few months prior, they were like, we can't let that stand. We want to demolish that body count. So they brought in like 150 extras to kill. They even reused some stuntmen, some playing up to 4 parts using different costumes and fake mustaches. Gee, you can't tell it all. There isn't much to say about this sequence other than if you played guns when you were a kid, this is exactly what you envisioned was happening all around you. He just shoots so many people, cuts off a guy's arm, scalps a guy, neuters someone with an axe. Oh, it's all great. It's great stuff. During all of this, Dan Hedaya gets killed pretty casually, and then it's down to Bennett and Matrix, the matchup we've all been waiting for. It may not be Matrix versus Wings Hauser, but it's the Austrian Oak versus the Australian Oval. It's such a bizarre matchup. You get this guy Bennett, he's paunchy in this ill-fitting chainmail with this Freddie Mercury mustache, and I'm sorry, I have a note here. Right. Sorry, I meant to say Bennett is a super intimidating, incredibly strong, even match for Arnold, but he is gleefully unhinged here. Arnold was right. He's just so excited to see Matrix.
I can beat you.
And there have been readings that their relationship is homoerotic in nature. It would explain the non-existence of Matrix's wife and Bennett's obsession with him. You be the judge.
Put the knife in me and look me in the eye. See what's going on in there when you turn it, right?
I'm gonna kill you, John.
Don't deprive yourself of some pleasure. Come on, Bennett. Let's party.
I mean, hard to argue. Now they fight, there's lots of steam and an electrocution that has no effect on Bennett at all. Then we get this line from Bennett.
I'm not gonna shoot you between the eyes! Shoot you between the balls!
Between the balls. Like, you just threw the sack? But before any sack shooting can be done, Arnold impales Bennett. Yeah, not homoerotic at all. Impales Bennett and uncorks one of the all-time great one-liners.
Let off some steam, Bennett.
And then the movie ends with Matrix carrying his daughter away. Kirby tries to lure him back into duty.
I'd just like you to start off your unit again, John.
But Matrix declines and hops on a plane with Cindy and Jenny off to a happy ending as some really jarring out-of-place end credits song plays. When Commando was released on October 4th, 1985, reviews were mixed, but I always like to check in with my man Ebert.
This movie doesn't have the sophistication of Terminator, Schwarzenegger's last big hit, but it's an effective entertainment, and there are 3 reasons for that. First, the special effects action sequences do work. Second, the sense of humor that's provided in this movie by Ray Dawn Chong is very refreshing. And third, the dependable presence of Schwarzenegger is good. He's strong enough to carry a goofy movie like this in more ways than one.
Ebert gets it. Commando opened at number 1 with $7.7 million. In the second week, it made enough money to surpass its budget, and it stayed on top for another week and ended up grossing $57.5 million worldwide, making it another profitable film for Arnold. Not quite Rambo First Blood Part 2 numbers, but this was just the beginning, and Arnold's box office numbers would steadily climb over the next decade until he hit the stratosphere. Commando was also successful enough that in 1986 there was a line of Commando toys, though they crafted a new story for the figures, and John Matrix leads the appropriately named C-Team against the forces of Fear, with names like Sawbones and Psycho. They also had a 16-inch version of John Matrix, where he's outfitted in this hilariously oversized tactical vest and ill-fitting khakis that make him look like a toddler who needs a diaper change. Commando is pure action spectacle with nothing more on its mind than to entertain you for 90 straight minutes. Yes, it is the source of most cliches and jokes about Arnold: bulging muscles, objects exploding for no reason, suiting up montages, excessively high body counts, but it also doesn't take itself seriously, like any movie by Stallone, Bronson, Chuck Norris, even Mel Gibson at the time. His take on Mad Max wasn't quippy. That would come later with Lethal Weapon. It's probably more closely related to a James Bond movie, which sounds weird, but it's a professional, cool under pressure, who clearly enjoys this job of killing and sometimes has a little too much fun with it. It benefits from Arnold's personality and humor being baked into the script. His instinct is to balance the violence with the humor because it releases the tension and lets people know not to take it too seriously. And here it pays off. It's violent by quantity, not quality. I mean, I wouldn't show it to my 5-year-old daughter. I'm not a psycho like Vernon Wells. I'm going to wait until she's 6. The violence is so ridiculous, it's hard to be offended by it. Plus, the self-awareness shields the movie from feeling like a depressing slog of death and destruction. In fact, I remember this movie more for the airplane, mall, and motel sequences than that whole third act death march, because it's essentially a comedy with some fight scenes thrown in. Arnold's performance here combines his cocky charisma from Pumping Iron, his incredible physicality from Conan, and his desire to play an actual leading man role, in this case by having a daughter he loves, into a perfect storm performance. He emotes well when it comes to his daughter and delivers his one-liners with precision. He's never been more comfortable on screen than as John Matrix, and on top of it, you can tell he's having fun and hitting his stride as an actor. And soon, he'll combine all of those skills with even better, more layered stories, but for now, Commando fucking rules. Alright, let's get to the stats. Acting chops 8, he is in his element, everything is starting to come together. Kill count, I kept a count, but it was hard to keep up during that final sequence. There's a bunch of different numbers, but I'm going to go with the highest one, 102, for a total of 215. What a jump. Catchphrase, man, so many good ones, but I think I have to go with I lied. And here are your updated every Arnold movie ever rankings. You got your cameos. Number 9, Hercules in New York. Number 8, The Villain. Number 7, Red Sonja. Number 6, Stay Hungry. Number 5, Conan the Destroyer. Number 4, Pumping Iron. Number 3, Conan the Barbarian. Number 2, Commando. That might be controversial, but I find Commando a more fun watch than Conan. And number 1, The Terminator. The Arnold brand was finally coalescing, but he'd hit one more roadblock on the way to superstardom in the form of his old producing pal Dino De Laurentiis, who wanted a Commando of his own. But their next collaboration would end up being their last and lead Dino to bankruptcy. Next time, I'm covering one of Arnold's least discussed action movies, Raw Deal. See you then.